Hello, my name is Robin Smart, and I'm honored to be your host for this Learning About Dementia series. As the education coordinator for the Alzheimer's Society Guelph Wellington, I truly know the value of learning about dementia if you, a family member, or anyone you know is affected. This series wouldn't be possible without the generous funding of the Guelph Community Foundation. Their support has allowed us to bring this series to you, and the Alzheimer's Society is sincerely grateful to the Guelph Community Foundation. We also extend thanks to the Village of Arbor Trails, who allowed us a location and provided refreshments for each of the sessions. But the biggest thanks goes to you for watching this DVD. There are 6 DVDs in the series, and although they build on each other, each one is designed to stand alone as well. We encourage you to watch all 6 in the series, but you can jump ahead to a topic that is of particular interest or really pertinent to you in your situation right now. After watching the DVDs, we encourage you to be in touch with our office for further education opportunities or to talk to one of our social workers. This DVD is a general overview of dementia. It looks at the warning signs, how to get a diagnosis, treatments, stages of the journey, and it also talks about the different free services that are available at the Alzheimer's Society. At the end of the DVD, we encourage you strongly to be in touch with your local Alzheimer's Society and take advantage of any or all of the supports available. So this is where we start. We start with the overview of dementia. And I'm going to actually start out with a joke. They say that any good speaker should open with a joke. And you might have seen this in the paper. This is Pickles, pretty popular comic. And the wife, Opal, is standing there, and she turns to her husband, Earl, and says, "Why are you just standing there?" And Earl says, I can't remember what I came in here for. And lately, this has been happening a lot. I think I'm losing my mind. And Opal says, "I wouldn't worry. Some memory loss is a natural part of the aging process. Just forget about it." What does Earl say? Forget about what? It's already gone. And we laugh at that. We laugh at that for a couple of reasons. Because it's kind of cute, but we laugh because we're scared. That might be happening to us. And if it is happening, this is where people come. And this is a shot of our office downtown on Macdonnell Street. That's the Alzheimer's Society office. It has a big front window and then no space after that. And you can't have lectures in a big front window. So that's why we're here today. So let's talk a little bit about Alzheimer's disease, what it is. Alzheimer's is a degenerative disease of the brain. It's not a normal part of aging. It's not just people getting older at all. It is a disease that progresses over time, and it can last anywhere from 2 to 20 years. On average, about 8 to 12, so around 10 years after diagnosis on average. I'm sorry to say that we don't have a clear-cut cure, but we do have a few treatments, and we'll talk about those later. If we knew the cause, we'd have solved the problem. Everybody says, what causes it? I'm sorry to say that we don't have a distinct, clear answer. But there are indicators that it might be tied to lifestyle choices. So we're going to encourage some healthy lifestyle choices as we go. So, as I said, Alzheimer's is progressive. It's degenerative. It is simply the fact that the brain cells are being impinged. And I'm going to take you on a tour of what happens inside those brain cells. They get broken down. And unfortunately, at the moment, we don't know how to repair the damage. So it is irreversible. Now, people often say to me, well, what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? And I'm willing to bet that secretly some of you were wondering that inside your own heads. Dementia actually isn't a disease unto itself. Dementia is a set of symptoms that accompany a disease. And so when you have dementia, you have changes in your ability in memory, judgment, reasoning, language, your ability to do daily tasks, and changes in personality and behavior that worsen over time. And that's a big, long list of things. And when we use the word dementia, we're really referring to all those changes that occur in cognition, ability, and personality. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a slide that talks about different types of dementia. And you might have come here because we're the Alzheimer's Society today, but we are really the Alzheimer and Related Dementias Society. Any form of dementia, any struggles with memory loss, impairment, we're the go-to place. Even if the word Alzheimer's has never come up in the conversation, we're still the place to visit. So as I said, dementia is not a disease, it's the symptoms that come with a disease. And on the screen you can see maybe a big red umbrella. And under that red umbrella are a number of diseases that I'm going to talk about. And those are the diseases that cause you to exhibit dementia. So Alzheimer's is the most common reason that somebody would have dementia. So you can think of Alzheimer's as the most common type of dementia. Over 60% of cases are due to Alzheimer's disease. But you can also have something called FTD. That's a short form for frontotemporal dementia. And that's a dementia that tends to strike a little younger. Alzheimer's tends to come after age 65 more often than not. And FTD dementia often comes a little earlier in the 50s and 60s. And with FTD, you don't have memory loss as one of your first signs, but with Alzheimer's, you often notice short-term memory impairments right away. There's also an arrow on the screen that says Lewy body. Has anybody ever heard of Lewy body dementia? One hand goes up in the audience. Lewy body is a dementia that looks almost like a cross between Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. People have a lot of trouble with movement, with rigidity. They have fluctuation in their cognition, and they often have a lot of hallucinations, really vivid hallucinations. That's Lewy body dementia. And more men than women tend to get Lewy body. More women than men tend to get Alzheimer's. And then there's one called vascular. You can have vascular dementia. And that's the one that is most amenable to treatment because we can do things to help control our blood pressure, control our weight, control our cholesterol, those sorts of things. Now, if having one of these diseases isn't bad enough, you can actually have two at the same time. Often you can have vascular and Alzheimer's dementia at the same time, and they call that mixed dementia. You can get Lewy body and Alzheimer's at the same time. The point that I want you to leave with today is not all the different diseases and what distinguishes them from each other, but the point is that the information I'm going to give you for the rest of the series and for the future is that you still come to the Alzheimer's Society. We're the go-to place for any one of these disease processes. Now, something to keep in mind is that sometimes you can look like you have a dementia. You could be confused, have trouble concentrating, have problems with your memory, but it's reversible. Sometimes you get the symptoms that look like a dementia, but it's fixable. And so some of the things that can happen is if you have undiagnosed depression or thyroid disease or diabetes, you can look like you might be in the beginning stage of Alzheimer's, but it's not. It's something that they can look at treating. You could have an interaction of medication, something your doctor's prescribed that you're taking, and then an over-the-counter medication might interact with each other. Or even if you're taking a prescribed medication correctly, as we age, we don't metabolize things as efficiently in our bodies, and we can build up a toxic level of medication and then look like we're really confused. So there are other things to check. You might be deficient in vitamins. You might be having problems with infections that you're not even aware of. And they can all make you look confused, and we want to try to render those things treatable and get them treated. So always get it checked out. There are some things that are irreversible, though, and those dementias are the ones I mentioned on the screen. Alzheimer's is just one type of those, and these are the things that, unfortunately, we can't go back and fix. Has anybody been following in the papers the controversy about head injury related to football and hockey and the early onset of dementia and the class action suit? Yeah. Well, indeed, there's a lot of literature, and we'll look at this later, about protecting your head from blows in order to reduce your risk of dementia. So what's normal and what's not normal? Let's talk about forgetting. What's normal and not normal? You'll be happy to know that forgetting a little bit is normal. Everybody does it. I do it. It's really embarrassing if I forget somebody's name and I've been introduced more than once, and I go up and I say, "Hi, I'm Robin," and they go, "Yeah, I've met you." Help me, folks, help me. It doesn't always happen. Or I'm in the middle of a lecture and I forget a word. I had 90 nursing students in front of me a few years ago, and the word responsibility floated out of my head. I don't know where it went, but it was not on the tip of my tongue. And I'm looking at these sea of faces trying to find the word responsibility. Moments like that are embarrassing, they're upsetting, they're frustrating, but they're common. They're not a reason to panic. So let's look at the difference between what's normal like that and what's not normal. It's absolutely normal to recognize somebody but forget their name. This happens to me at church all the time. I meet somebody who sits on the other side of church, and then I don't meet them again for several months. I recognize them. I can tell you what pew they sit in. I can tell you who they sit behind and in front of, but I don't know their name. I know the context, though, so that's the difference. It's not that I don't recognize them and I don't know the context. So if you can put the name goes, but you can put the place you know them from in there, then that's a good thing. If when you get up in the morning, you look at the calendar or the newspaper and you fix in your head what day of the week it is, you need to be able to really hold that all day. If, though, you're asking over and over every half hour, every hour, what's today, what's today, what's today, then that would be a little concerning. So hopefully you can remember the day and the time. If you had a recent experience and you literally just forgot that you'd done something, then that would be concerning. If you forgot the few details about it, that wouldn't be anything to worry about. But if you lose the event itself, then that's a little concerning. If I were to go out to lunch with a friend, and let's say we went for Chinese. Do any of you like Chinese? Yeah. So I don't get to eat Chinese very much because my husband's diabetic, and it's not really the best choice because he would have a bowl of red sauce and nothing else. So I don't go out. So let's say I go out for Chinese food with somebody, and we have a good time. And I phone them up 2 weeks later, and I say to them, "Had a great time when we went out for lunch. I'd like to do that again. Let's eat Chinese again next time." And they say to me, "I haven't been out to lunch with you." Then there's a problem. If they say to me, "Oh yeah, what restaurant did we eat at?" I'm not so worried. But if they can't remember that we went out, when I call them 2 weeks later, then I'm worried. So if you lose the event itself, a little concern. I know that every one of you will probably put your hand up, and I'll put mine up first. How many people have gone into a room and said, "What on earth did I come here for? What am I here to get? What am I after?" Absolutely. Frustrating but normal. I would be concerned if you went into a room and didn't recognize that you'd gone in to get something. You weren't the least worried about what you were there for, because you'd already forgotten that you were trying to get something, or if you couldn't re-cue yourself. If you go back, let's say I went to the basement because I wanted to get something. And I get down to the basement and I see that, oh, the DVDs have been left out and the ironing board's in the middle of the floor and things are a mess. And I start thinking about that and I forget, what am I there for? Once I go back up to the kitchen and I think, oh yes, I was getting the big stock pot, I've re-cued myself. So that's not a worry. It's if I go to the basement and I don't recognize that I went to get something, or I go back to the kitchen and there's no cue there that I pick up that I went for the stock pot, then I would worry. So some of the things that are red flags are memory loss that affects you day to day. It stops you from doing what you would normally do. It interferes with your ability to function. And again, these are all written out for you in that brochure. When you do look at the brochure called the 10 Warning Signs, I encourage you to remember two things. First of all, you're going to see yourself in all 10 signs. Stop and take a breath. Breathe in deeply and relax and get a grip for a minute. It is a matter of degree. We can recognize ourselves in any of the 10 signs I'm going to take you through. But it's when it stops you from doing what you need to do in a day that it's a problem. The other thing is that these 10 signs are not rank ordered. So it's not as if they come in a particular order at all. You could have 1 and 10. You could have 9 and 5 and 4. They come in combinations. Not everybody has the same signs and symptoms in the same order or to the same degree. So it's not rank ordered. So it's memory loss that affects your day-to-day functioning. It's difficulty performing familiar tasks. If it's something that you always did and you did it well and you now have trouble with it, and not for a physical reason because your arthritis prevents you from perhaps manipulating knitting needles, it's because you can't follow the pattern anymore, then there would be a concern. So if it's something you did before and you can't do it now, then there would be a concern there. My mother is an avid gardener, very, very good gardener. And if she went out in the garden and started pulling up the flowers and leaving the weeds, I would worry about her. I would definitely be concerned. My husband, God love him, cannot tell a real plant from a silk plant. If he went out in the garden and he did the same thing, I wouldn't think about it at all because he's just not horticulturally sensitive. Doesn't know beans about greenery. So it has to be something that's different for the person. You can't compare person to person. You can only compare the person against themselves. Problems with language. Well, I gave you that example when the word responsibility flew away. This would be more than that. This would be a situation where people often struggle to find nouns to name objects, lose track in the middle of sentences, substitute funny words so the sentences don't make sense, and that's happening often, often, often. Just about everything becomes a thing. I need that thing and that thing and that thing. Everything's a thing. That would be a cue to me. Disorientation to time and place, and this can happen really early in the disease process. People who are in very familiar areas or on a familiar route, perhaps to church or the grocery store or the hairdresser, get lost. So it's not being able to find your bearings in very familiar circumstances, and after a moment or two, it doesn't come back to you. Poor or decreased judgment. Well, we all make mistakes now and then. This is not that sort of thing. This is an acting out of character when it comes to judgments. If you cut yourself really badly and didn't recognize the need to go to the hospital for stitches, and then a day or two later, not only are you still got a wound there, you're starting to see red streaks go up your arm, and it doesn't cue you. Whoa, I'd better get some medical attention here. So poor judgment. Maybe giving vast sums of money away to strangers. Inviting strangers in to stay in your home. Hi, got somewhere to go tonight? Come to my place. That sort of thing. Problems with abstract thinking. There's a picture of money on the slide up there because money makes the world go round, they say. Well, money's a pretty important commodity, but it is something that relies on numbers. If we're going to do money, we have to understand numbers. And numbers are the most common abstract concept there is. Think about how often in a day you use numbers. Who woke up and looked at the clock this morning to see what time it was, to see whether they had to get out of bed or not? Right. And then when you went downstairs, maybe you used a microwave for something. You might have turned on a television, in which case you need numbers for the remote. You might have chosen to turn your computer on. Probably only me, who was getting ready for work, did that. But I needed numbers to code in my secret passwords, that sort of thing. If you took a bus today, if you drove today, if you cooked today, if you measured today, if you did banking today, if you shopped today, all those things require numbers, and that gets damaged early, so that's a problem. And misplacing things. We all lose stuff, but this is in bizarre places. I had a woman who tells this story against herself. She has Alzheimer's disease, and her son eventually moved in to live with her. And her son came up to her one day, and he said, "Mom, you like cool music, don't you?" And Mom thought, "Hey, yeah, I'm still hip. Yeah. He said, "No, Mom, you like cool music." "I like music. What are you on about?" She had put all the CDs in the freezer. That's not normally where I store my CDs, probably not yours. So it's putting things in quite bizarre places. Changes in mood and behavior. And this is something where we see what appears to come out of nowhere, a change of mood to either tears or anger. And you're thinking, what happened there? So sudden mood changes for no apparent reason. And this kind of goes with changes in personality. I'm going to show you some brain slides a little later this afternoon. And one of the things that happens is that we get changes in the brain chemicals when we get these diseases. And so with the change in brain chemical balance, we have a tendency towards more anxiety, depression, paranoia, worry. It just comes part and parcel. You'll also see changes where people were very outgoing and they become withdrawn, or people were maybe a little more inhibited and they become quite outspoken, maybe a little belligerent and disinhibited. So changes that way. And loss of initiative. When you look at your folder, that's going to be the last thing listed, and yet this is the first thing that gets people to the doctor's office often. And the loss of initiative is not just, oh, I'm tired of scrubbing toilets, I'm not going to scrub toilets anymore, I've spent 70 years doing housework, I'm done with that. It's more a situation where someone is quite literally content to sit, to just sit, to not do, to not engage. They don't do their hobbies, they don't do their interests, they don't initiate conversation, they look fairly withdrawn and flat. So that's what the loss of initiative is. So day to day, realistically, if somebody has problems with these sorts of things, sorting mail, balancing a checkbook, following a conversation, they're constantly asking the same question or forgetting appointments, if they forget where things are put or they're in odd places, can't find your car in the parking lot, let's hope you're looking for the model you're currently driving. If you're out there looking for the car you owned 20 years ago, you're in trouble. If they can't follow directions or they're unable to complete familiar tasks, these are things that I would be concerned about. So if you do have a memory difficulty, I'm going to really encourage you to get it checked out. Take it seriously and get it checked out, because the medications that are available that can be used for Alzheimer's and for Lewy body, and for example, and there are other medications, different ones for vascular dementia, they've been shown to effectively slow the disease in some people. So if I knew that I had a disease that was spread out over time, and I discovered it at this end of the continuum, that's where I'd like to be held, thank you. So I want to get those meds sooner than later. So how would you get a diagnosis? How would you know if you even needed that medication? Unfortunately, there is no single test. There is no definitive blood test or cerebral spinal fluid test or indicative test with X-ray machines. It's a fairly lengthy process. They're going to look for a baseline of functioning. They're going to want to hear what you say and what your family or people you live with say, because those stories don't always match. They're going to take, as it says on the screen here, a full medical history. They'll give you some paper and pencil tests. They'll do some lab tests to eliminate other possibilities. And you'll probably be referred on, if your GP doesn't make a diagnosis, to a specialist. In this neck of the woods, you could be sent to a memory clinic, to a neurologist, to a gerontologist, to a geriatric psychiatrist. So there are a number of options, or your GP can diagnose himself. The treatments that are available are Aricept, Exelon, Remenil, and Ibixa. Those drugs don't cure, they don't stop the disease process, but they help you with the symptoms so that you can function better on a daily basis. Not everybody can take the medications. Unfortunately, they're contraindicated in many people. But they can help in about 25% of the cases. You get an uprise in ability. In about 50% of cases, you get a level line, which is actually a success story when you consider the fact that the disease trajectory is a downward line. And then about 25% of people either can't take the medication or don't tolerate it well. Now, there are some risk factors associated with Alzheimer's disease, and age is the #1 risk factor. Age is up there above family history because it trumps family history. Age is your #1 risk factor. And unfortunately, if you had a family member, and that would be a first-line relative, either a parent or a sibling, your grandparents don't count genetically speaking, so a parent or a sibling, your increased risk is only 5%. If you had 2 first-line relatives, your increased risk is only 15%. Whereas with age, for every 5 years after age 65, your risk doubles. So age is your #1 risk factor. And poor lifestyle choices. If you are, unfortunately, somebody who has very high blood pressure or is very obese or has high cholesterol, those things unchecked can lead to problems. So I'm just going to take you very quickly through some of the stages. And again, this is in your handout. So most people talk about an early, middle, late. That's how they divide it up. Or you could call it mild, moderate, severe. It's just who you're talking to, what term they use. They're really talking about the same thing. I've said something about Risberg's 7 stages because if you are working with a clinician, if you're working with any sort of specialist, they might use the Risberg 7 stages scale. So I wanted you to at least hear that. But most people will talk about early, middle, late, and that's the way we're going to look at it today. So the progression in the early stage, you probably notice changes in short-term memory. People have a lot of trouble retaining information, learning new information. They'll have difficulty concentrating, they'll have trouble following directions, and they'll struggle to find the right word. Those are the cognitive changes that are happening. But you'll also see some personality changes in the early stage. You'll see a little less sparkle and spontaneity. You might see sort of a flat affect, people appearing indifferent, and people often start withdrawing from their usual activities. And functionally, people start to say, what's happening to me? They start questioning, what's happening? Am I crazy? Am I stupid? What's going on? You might see people getting lost, and they often appear vague or uncertain. Might get out of a car and not really know which direction to go once they've stepped out of the car. Often they're hesitant to initiate activities, and the forgetfulness means that they really can't function without reminders and cues. Then in the middle stage, cognitively, you're going to see a real dip in memory ability, and it's really hard to retain any new information. They have trouble recalling things, doing calculations, making decisions, and planning. The organization piece starts to get damaged in the mid-stage, and they start to lose their own memory of their personal history. So it's kind of hard for them to remember things that happened in the recent past, and it starts to affect their long past. In the middle stage, personality-wise, people sometimes appear a little egocentric. They often appear self-interested. That seems to go up. And so does confusion, anxiety, and mood changes. And people can often be quite suspicious in the middle stage. And then functionally, they start to lose the ability to initiate and sequence. And we think sequencing is so easy. We know that we put our pants on before our shoes. You know, we know that intuitively. We don't think about it every morning. We just do it in that order. Unfortunately, if you lose the ability to sequence, you're maybe trying to put your shoes on before you get your foot through your pant leg. They'll have visual spatial problems. You might see people having trouble or sort of feeling their way onto furniture. Or if they're going from one room to another and the floor changes color between the two rooms, you might see them take an exaggerated step because it starts to look like an uneven level surface there. More potential to get lost, and maybe some sleep disturbances, day and night getting a bit mixed up there. In the late stage, cognitively, they'll have some really significant impairments in their ability for judgment and to do simple tasks and to understand others and express their own feelings. So that's in the late stage. You also see in the late stage some personality changes. They seem to lack warmth the way they had, and often you might see either lethargy, where nothing, sit, 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 sleep, 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 or they get hyperactive. You can't get them to sit for love nor money. It can go in either direction. And in the late stage, functionally, they lose the ability to do activities of daily living. Though that's a big fancy word for getting themselves bathed and dressed and toileted and fed and groomed. So they need full-time care and supervision. At the very end of life, you might see trouble with the ability to speak, to understand, to recognize people. They probably become much more withdrawn, and they will require total care. Now, no matter what stage somebody is at, early, middle, late, whatever, it's important to know that any behavior has meaning. Wherever they are in their journey, what they do is a form of communication. So changes in behavior are often seen as a result of the disease process. Why are they doing that? They have dementia. Oh, they have dementia, so they're doing that. And it's kind of a vicious circle. It goes in a little cycle, and we never break that cycle if we don't recognize that behavior has meaning. It's very hard to do, but I'm going to encourage you as best you can to try not to take any behavior personally. When people are unfortunately having a disease process that changes their cognitive abilities, they don't have the same filtering process, and we're going to talk about that a lot after the break. So they might say or do things that are out of character that they wouldn't have done before. Try not to take that personally. It says look for the person behind the disease. We always try to focus on the person. Build on their strengths and abilities. Sometimes we get hung up on what folks can't do anymore, and we make assumptions that they can't do anything at all, and that's not necessarily correct. You can definitely look for what people can do and support that, trying to focus on the positive. So, some free services, and again, you have a brochure here, and I want to encourage you to take advantage of our free services, because who can't afford free? Is that too expensive for anybody here? No charge is right on. We have support groups for people with dementia and for their caregivers. We have one-to-one support, and you can receive that in your own home, via the phone, over the internet, wherever. We do email with people if that suits them. We have a whole series of family information nights and First Link education. We support the Medical Alert Safely Home program, so that we really encourage signing up for that to reduce the risk of becoming lost and not being able to get back to where you need to go. We have a whole slew of resource centers, and again, it's free for the asking. You can borrow books or DVDs. That's where this set of DVDs is going to go at the end of the day. We also have a resource library that's full of adapted activities so that you can still do interesting and recreational things. And we have a resource library that's full of safety equipment. So if you want to borrow something and trial it to see if it's any good, you're welcome to do that. We have big conferences and education. We just ran Allies in Aging. Just over 500 people attended. So sometimes we do small groups, sometimes we do big groups. Speaking engagements, Anywhere you can get 4 or more people, we'll come and give any sort of topic you want related to dementia. We have a friendly visiting program, the Volunteer Companion Program, and we have free newsletters. So if you want to know what's going on or what education is coming, I'll take your name and your number and we'll get you signed up for the free newsletter. So if you want to contact us for our free services, all of this information, all that contact information is on the back of all of the brochures that you received today. So when you look at the back of the brochure, all that information is on the back there. It's right there for you.